Hello my friends. Today we're going to talk about a movie my friend invited me to watch the other day. My friend saw the trailer and thought it would be an artistic and fulfilling journey, and when I saw the trailer I thought the same. I will talk in this video about what this movie made me feel and what I think about it, as well as about its creator Phil Tippett. When you see the trailer, you think that the movie is going to be about this unique world with this explorer-type character. A war is going on, you see some creatively designed character with some wonderful old-school stop-motion animation. The aesthetics of this just scream at you with detail, and there's an authenticity about it that you know it was some meticulous work behind it. In a world of remakes and sequels done with superficial work, the public seeks for more unique stuff done with care. So Mad God comes at you with this promise, having been a project in the making for 30 years, as the trailer mentions. When you find out who is behind it, you get even more interested because we're talking about Phil Tippett, the man responsible for the stop-motion animation and characters in George Lucas's Star Wars, RoboCop, and Spielberg's Jurassic Park. All I can say is that the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park still feel more real than any other modern production I've seen. However, Jurassic Park also set a death sentence for a lot of Phil Tippett's work. At that point, a lot of depression started to overcome Phil, as he thought he was out of work because CGI was taking over, but when he least expected, he got called for work again, as the CGI stuff wasn't quite matured yet and it needed some guiding. Jurassic Park was merging stop-motion techniques with CGI, and the only reason it didn't go full CGI is because the CGI people back then didn't know anything about how to set the scene, how to animate something within the context or production and post-production. So Phil's knowledge was still necessary. He was an expert at dinosaur anatomy and movement, and also knew everything there is to know about production and setting. The result was new technology, but built on the skeleton of the old. Stop-motion models were used, but recorded in the computer, as opposed to being filmed, and Phil was directing everything that the CGI people did. From that point onward, Phil's work wasn't that called for, but he still worked on one big hit called Starship Troopers. I've listened to some interviews with him and what he has to say about working in big films, and about his underground basement project that he truly wanted to make, which was Mad God. A project he managed to build in his free time with volunteers and crowdfunding. He did enjoy and he is grateful for working on the big films with some great memories, but he has some criticism regarding the fast-paced production and the linear recipe-type Hollywood scripts.
You know, narrative films, they're all kind of sort of follow the same pattern, Mad God's a lot of things that I'm not allowed to do, There's a lot of other narrative possibilities out there. There's not just the Hollywood way, which is, on page 15 this has to happen, and page 25 this has to happen, and blah, 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 and character arcs, and all of that stuff, that you read in the book is like, you can do that if you want to, but you don't have to.
I believe he's completely right here. Because of rushed production and stories that are built on presetted fixed notions of where and what needs to be from a script and pacing point of view, the films can end up looking lifeless and there's a same old feeling about them. This can be experienced and felt in today's mainstream movies and video games much more than back when Phil was in his prime. Even though they were mainstream, movies like Star Wars, RoboCop and Jurassic Park still had a clear identity and sparked everyone's imagination. Those movies became classics that can still be watched after 30 years. Name a few films from nowadays that you would like to rewatch next year or 10 years from now. It's kinda hard. Maybe John Wick. But look at the recent Matrix as an example for a rushed product that you will not remember, that ruined the legacy of the first Matrixes. It's like in an uncreative dead world, someone is trying to resurrect a project from the amazing past, but producing it with dumb methods of today. It's still going to suck. A title and some characters from the past are not going to save the day. And today is not just about the inability to make something original or rushing a project, it's also about inserting agendas of the woke culture, inserting social justice warrior stuff, feminism, LGBT activism, etc. I'm not saying all mainstream productions do that, but they do it more or less, and people who talk against it are heavily punished with the cancel culture phenomenon, and your friends will hate you on social media if you don't get banned on those platforms, that is. Phil Tippett is not complaining about any of this stuff though. As a matter of fact, he is kind of a social justice warrior himself in his Mad God production, where he wants to talk about how Americans take everything for granted and built its society by destroying other cultures. I didn't have to interpret this, he said it himself.
It probably can be best characterized by the shame that I feel for our privilege in this country that was built on the backs of destroying a lot of other people and not taking responsibility for it. It's like, that's pretty tough. That's the misanthropic note that I'm attempting to play in Mad God.
When I watched the movie, I also saw that point, but I saw it in the sense that he was speaking through the imagery about humanity in general, how sometimes they mindlessly built while destroying themselves in the process. But that's not because of God, it's because of individuals and broken systems that people make. For example, when in my country Romania, the communists built the House of Parliament, because it was such a hell of a construction to build, a lot of people literally died in the process of building it. In Phil's Mad God, you get a lot of this being depicted, but to the extreme. During the explorer's journey, which is sent in by some Nazi caricature type society, well, the explorer is actually an assassin who is sent into enemy territory with a bomb. But during this journey, we see him going through different environments, including this society where everyone is dying all over the place. Building something, but also dying, getting crushed, dismembered, burned, all sorts of creatively demented ways of dying. Sometimes they get cut to pieces by these black rectangle flying monoliths that they themselves built. In their design and properties, these things are very similar to the monolith in 2001 Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. The problem that I have with these scenes is that they don't really get the point across. Phil himself has described his creation as a collage that doesn't respect traditional writing and that lets the viewer fill in the gaps.
There's a narrative.
Okay.
But the plot is structured in such a way that it'll allow me, it's kind of like this idea of multi-universes or like wormholes.
Okay.
So that, within the narrative, I've structured it so that I can go to different places if different ideas open up. So I might shoot something and then like 2 years later get an idea that could be an offshoot of that, like another avenue. And it sounds a little bit like a game world kind of thing, but it's not my intention. It's just to figure out a way of creating this space that's, it's a dystopic kind of, more of like a collage kind of mentality in terms of putting images together.
He says that in this style you can have plot holes and you can get away with it because that's the style of the narrative collage. The viewer will give it meaning. So we have a bunch of scenes that are very violent in nature, even if it's not with humans. There are basically bipedal creatures, homunculuses, things that are made of random body parts mashed together, doing some very disgusting things or killing each other, puking, what looks like shitting while getting electrocuted, demented sexual stuff, etc. Without a narrative to at least give it some context from which we can extract meaning. It's hard to think about metaphors of society when half the time I'm simply just shocked by the imagery. There's a scene where there are some creatures shaking around in some cages, and there's this one weird looking doll in a cage that fingers her vagina. Completely pointless and out of context. What's the point except for some shock value? And it's just shock value after shock value. Even Satan or whatever, a bull-like entity, gets his penis wanked off by some creatures. There's a lot of bull symbolism. Towards the end there's a gate guarded by them, through which this death-like creature takes a baby to its death in some kind of alchemical experiment to create some new universe. Well, it's not a real baby, it's a random creature, but still, it was taken in a live, disgusting operation from the belly of the explorer. Is this the empathy that we're supposed to feel and that is advertised in the trailer? Well, I didn't want to feel it. Those scenes are simply disgusting. In all its great detail and all its great art, done in 30 years of meticulous basement planning, if you're just throwing these ridiculously demented scenes at the audience, what was it all for? Phil describes it himself. It's just a manifestation of his visions, and he's just the one that puts it in reality. He also describes it as a means to keep his depression and anxiety under control, as in, when he gets those feelings, he works on Mad God, which if you look at it, that's what it is. Pure depression and hopelessness, but meticulously crafted. Do I want to see this product? Well, I've seen it, and I don't want more of it. And if it was something like 2 hours long, I wouldn't have watched it at all. But someone has to go through the trenches to tell you guys not to watch it. It's a complete waste of time.
So a great deal of Mad God works within a very limited structure, but a lot of it's not ruled by intention. It's like I'm letting the work tell me what it wants to be, and then I'm more like a facilitator, for that. I'm like an abbot in the Church of Mad God, doing what the deity tells me. I'm like an abbot in the Church of Mad God, doing what the deity tells me. Yeah, hopefully I can, do more Mad God, do more Mad God, do more Mad God.
Let's talk about some of these things. Like what is this right here?
Well, this is, one of the key characters is an assassin that through various misadventures gets turned into a victim. And so he gets eviscerated.
Look, I appreciate all the work and the meticulous nature of the craft, but this is not better than the mainstream shallow Hollywood crap. If anything, it's worse. It feels like you knocked on my door, and to prove to me that the world is shit, you start throwing a bunch of cow shit on my walls. Cow shit meticulously collected from the cows on the fields of Austria. But man, it's cow shit. Stop doing that and get some help. Phil told us how his parents tried to send him to a psychologist once. Well, maybe he should try that. I respect his career and his work on the mainstream projects that inspired my imagination. I respect his criticism of Hollywood, but I do not respect his alternative that just looks like this postmodern satanic abomination. If he does that, he's not different than them. In fact, a lot of people at Hollywood are into weird, dark shit. When they're not busy looking good on the big screen, they like going to weird spirit cooking, which simulates cannibalism, or being satanic pedophiles themselves on strange private islands. They are heroes on the screen and perverted degenerates off-screen. The thing that I least expected when I saw the creative, amazing stop-motion animation trailer of Mad God was to see Satan getting his penis wanked in stop-motion animation in the actual film. He said himself that he gets his visions from a mad god, and that he is the one who delivers this imagery as a mad god's abbot.
For that. I'm like an abbot in the Church of Mad God, doing what the deity tells me.
Now, an abbot is like a monk, so that's some interesting spiritual choice of describing a creative process. Sounds more like he's getting these thoughts from a demon, and he's possessed by it while writing these dark and meaningless perversions as a satanic monk. Look, he may not be a Satanist, and maybe depression can make you write mad stuff like this, and if you're a world-class animation guy, you're probably going to be able to apply a huge level of production value to your depression-influenced story. But does that mean it's good art? Not to me. However, I see people seeing him as a genius, praising this type of work and wanting more of it. In fact, his project got fully funded on Kickstarter to create these perversions, and he said he's gonna create more of it. Our society is doomed. One time, Phil Tippett tried to make an educational material with stop-motion animated dinosaurs for children. He tried to sell it, and was refused because they told him the kids were going to be scared. Now that can tell you something. If he can't tell himself that his work is scary for children's education, then what kind of person is he? He was trying to sell his dark, demented stuff to kids? Okay, maybe it wasn't that demented, but there was a creepy vibe about it. No, this just makes me think maybe some people should just be tools of a project, but not the project designers. If George Lucas hired him to make Jabba the Hutt and all those crazy aliens and props, and he did a good job, then he's good at that job. But left to do his own work, he just presents not a dark story or a horror story, because those can be made in good ways, but rather a meaningless nightmare. I'm not a fan of postmodern, avant-gardistic, gory junk. Yes, use your skills and experience to give us stories that spark our imagination, that make us wonder what happens next. If you want to teach us lessons about society, do it in a way that we can actually get your message, and without resorting to shock value after shock value after shock value scenes with no point. Our modern and morally relativistic world will applaud this work, but I won't. I equally hate the mainstream movie garbage, but also hate this dark alternative. It's too dark and disgusting. And this is coming from a guy who occasionally also listens to metal music. I was a different kid. I sought the alternative world. I sought what you call movies that bend and play with your mind. But this is not one of them. This is a movie that literally destroys your mind. You can't unsee some stuff that you see here. And if you do see it, well, I saw it, and I felt that in order to redeem myself from watching such trash, I had to make a video telling people not to watch it. So there you go. The title Mad God implies that God is insane for creating a violent, chaotic world. But it is not God who is insane, it is us who choose our paths. God gave us ultimate freedom and expects us to use that freedom for good. So let's build a society that reflects our good-spirited nature, and that's it. No need to make gory, disgusting movies to make the point that society is broken. Phil Tippett, wake up, man, and do some actual cool shit with meaning. We have enough degeneracy. So that's all I have for today. There's probably more to it, but unfortunately I can't rewatch this, but I hope you get the point. Stay away from the mad god, follow the good god. This is Vostov Vlad, signing out.